Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to have a look at the next edition of what they are adding to the roadmap. And by the way, you can vote on this one, so make sure to get your votes in. All you have to do is go down to the bottom of this article. I'll leave a link in the description for you to cast your votes. Now, what are they doing? They're basically trying to make a specific type of vehicle more useful. One of the problems that we've talked about for the longest period of time is tank destroyers in a lot of spaces in the game don't really make a lot of sense to use. Unless you're doing stuff like dailies or things like that, they're not exactly the best type of vehicle because they just don't have any mechanics which really help them out. They usually don't have better reloads, they sometimes have bigger guns, but usually weaker armor, and are open to getting annihilated by stuff. If you have a look at light tanks, for example, they have scouting, they have artillery, they also usually have quite a lot of smoke grenades and also great mobility. If you have a look at medium tanks, they have access to artillery as well, so they can use that. Heavy tanks obviously have the ability to be pretty down-tiered and annihilate stuff because things won't be able to pen them, depending, of course, on the heavy tank. When it comes to tank destroyers, they don't really have an advantage. A lot of them actually are worse than just their standard of the vehicles, which is why you have a lot of SPGs, tank destroyers, and other vehicles that go down in BR quite a lot because of the fact that they just don't work very well. Sturmil, Dicker Max, SU-57, if you want to throw that one in, and also stuff like the SU-76. So they're looking to change that, which I think is kind of cool. The idea is to add in different things that you can build for these types of vehicles in order to actually make them easier to use and also to make them fit how they would realistically work, more in a defensive posture to be able to then kind of push forward. So the way that they're doing it is pretty simple. They're expanding it to a lot of vehicles. Here they actually discuss the idea that what they want to do is, or what they were working out is which vehicles were worthy of the changes and which vehicles weren't. And instead, what they've just decided to do is give it to everything. So all tank destroyers, all ATGM carriers, and also all SBAAs and SAMs will benefit from this, and also vehicles that have access to external rockets and bombs, which you can use. So it's kind of crazy at the end of the day, which is what's happening. Now, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make not just defenses that you can fight around, but also ways that you can get access to more ammunition. One of the biggest issues with stuff like ATGM carriers, like the M113A1s, they're incredibly limited on ammunition. They only have like 10 missiles or something similar to that, which means that you have a lot less capability than even just a standard medium tank at the same BR. Also, if you have a look at something like the SU-51, for example, at the lower tiers of the USSR tech tree, it also doesn't have a lot of ammo. So this change is trying to address that. Now, what's interesting is obviously you can vote on what can get access to these things, but what is the functionality itself? That's probably what we should focus on, just to kind of give you an idea what's happening, right? So the idea is simple. They're going to add objects that you can construct as an individual for your own purposes. So the examples that they give forward are pretty cool. First of all, you have ammunition boxes. So this will actually be one or two types of boxes, depending on what type of vehicle that you have. And basically, you'll be able to construct them and use them to replenish your ammo. This will help a lot of different vehicles, once again, including the ATGM carriers that we just talked about, which are super limited on ammo. And unless you want to get to a capture point, you know, it's going to be very, very hard to find. So the best way of doing something like this is by you being able to kind of plop down ammo, which is exactly what they're saying that you can do right here, right? So you can see this object will consist of one or two types of boxes, depending on the number of weapon groups of your vehicle, separate box for guns and separate box for missile and rockets. So for vehicles with external rockets or bombs, there'll only be one box for the additional weapon. Ammunition for the main gun will have to be replenished at a capture point as normal. So that's talking about stuff like the Calliope, for example, which has the 75 45mm, but it also has all the rockets on top. This thing is mainly designed to obviously give you just the rockets, but for ATGM vehicles, for example, it will give you the ATGMs. And then after running out of shells in the box, it will disappear. So this is a way that you can just plonk down something and stay in more of a stationary area to be able to fight from, instead of being forced around certain different stuff, such as capture points, which don't really work with a lot of vehicles of this type of nature. In order to fight at capture points, you need to be mobile, you need to be able to rotate quite easily, and you need to get the gun on target a lot more, than you would in more of a flanking route or a defensive route. This means that it's a lot easier because you don't have to go towards those capture points in order to actually get more ammo back. So this means that you can take your positions a bit better. Then you also have a camouflage net, which I think is actually really cool. This is actually a visual wall at approximately 6 meters wide and 3 meters high that you can hide vehicles from the enemy in. So you can literally just sit behind it. And my guess is it'll probably be similar to like the one that you always see on the Germans side of things, where it has like the 4 walls maybe between them, or maybe just like the wall on the front, which will cover it in. And what is kind of cool about this one is it will actually affect arcade battle stuff. So it will help hiding your player marker in arcade, which is really cool. But then you can also see here the color of the net is automatically selected depending on the location, which is kind of cool. So yellow for desert, white for winter, and basic green for the rest. No more than 4 uses per spawn. The construction is 10 seconds and the timer until reuse is 10 seconds. So you can basically plonk down one here, one here, one here, one here, and you can make yourself a box to sit in. Now this is like... So this is good, but also bad, because what it can do is it can put a target on your head because you've just plonked down a camouflage net. So somebody just sees that and goes, oh, where's that come from? But also it means that you can hide behind it at later stages of the battle. So this might actually be better to set up for allies to put in strategic places so it's easier for them to actually move to the next zone, which I think is kind of cool. So that is something to think about. And then also trenches and mounds. So they're going to kind of set up these trenches and mounds, which are similar to the digging trenches that you can make, but instead it will automatically make it for you. So you can see here, this would not be very convenient due to the restrictions on the angle of inclination and curvature of the surface, as well as restrictions on proximity and the inability to cross other stationary objects. Instead, we're proposing to expand the surface modification capabilities. Currently, digging is only available with a bulldozer. We propose to supplement the mechanics of changing the landscape by adding to vehicles this new functionality, which is really cool. So basically, you can go into excavation mode, select the digging or pouring mode, and then move the brush cursor with the action button held down. So very similar to what you would see in like an RTS, for example. Like I've been playing a lot of Men of War 2 recently, and there you can create trenches, you can create sandbags, you can create, gun positions, you can create camouflage nets. Exactly the same idea here, but you actually do it in War Thunder. The only issue is you're doing it in a live game, so you're going to have to do it pretty quick. They actually show here how it's kind of going to work. So in this little video, where you dig out an area of the ground with your cursor, and then what you can do is you can just go and plop in it. I think this is actually really cool, and I generally think that this is kind of awesome. And it's a lot easier to do than the digging mechanic that is on a bunch of the spades, because that, by the way, was quickened up, by the way. So yeah, you can see here, this time spent preparing a fully fledged position using this mechanic will noticeably be greater than when using a bulldozer blade. The number of uses per spawn is not limited, but each change to the surface costs stamina, which is restored over time. So it will take a long time to build something like this, but if you're a person who's going to set up in a prepared position with something like an ATGM carrier or something like an SU-51, which is something that will need that ammunition box, this will obviously help quite a lot. So in terms of these mechanics and how they're going to work, it is kind of interesting to see, because the first part is destroying them. So your allies won't be able to destroy the stuff that you create. The only people who could destroy them is either you or the enemy. So your prepared positions or your ammo crates cannot be annihilated by your teammates. The other thing to also mention when it comes to this setup is, in order to construct it, you will basically have to stand still next to it to do it. Very similar to how like the ammo replenishment works for capture mode. The similar thing also happens where you can build like half of it, and then you could go away to like fight something else and then come back and then build the other half if you want to. So that's also something that you can focus on, which I think is really cool. And also for arcade battles, they are changing stuff because obviously when you run out of missiles in arcade, you replenish them automatically. They're actually going to remove this mechanic, so you'll have to spawn the ammo boxes, which is kind of there. One other thing that's also not really talked about here is if this will be a modification or it will just be standard for the vehicles. My guess is it will be standard for the vehicles, but yeah, it's something that we'll have to see what they decide to do. Maybe you could kind of vote on it at the same time. So what this is doing is it's giving a new lease of life to a lot of vehicles which are pretty bad, right? Let's not split hairs here, right? The ATGM vehicles, the vast majority of them are terrible, okay? The vast majority of tank destroyers have significant weaknesses, which mean that they are harder to play than their medium tank, heavy tank, light tank counterparts. And basically all of those other vehicles, including SBAAs, have had various changes, many different changes over the last few years, which benefit them in one way or another. Where ATGM vehicles and tank destroyers, the only thing they've got is some BR changes, and even some of them have actually made them worse, such as the M113A1s, where they continue to increase their BRs, even though they're just not very good vehicles. So, in general, this is a new lease of life for those vehicles. It also adds a strategic component to the game, which a lot of people have been asking for, being able to create prepared defenses, being able to put down some cover, being able to create a line, maybe even the Maginot line on Maginot, and then also being able to replenish ammo, meaning that you can hold a position for longer. Now, this to me, I think is actually really cool. As a person who's a huge fan of RTSs, War Thunder is one of those games which I feel like, from like the World War mode perspective, has a really good mix of like RTS and standard gameplay. But I think they missed the mark a little bit with, World War mode. But when I look at these types of mechanics and how they're being implemented, it gives me that little RTS feel, which I feel like is good. The only problem with a lot of these is going to be the setup time, right? It's the same issue with like the spades where they dig in. It takes too long to set a lot of these things up, which means that most people are not going to do it. But this is also not designed for most people. This is designed for people who enjoy these types of vehicles, and then also at the same time want something which is different compared to others. I honestly think this is a very, very positive thing. I can't really see a ton of downsides with it. Obviously, using strategic camouflage nets around the place might be a little bit odd, because, as I said, you can kind of dummy with them, or also you can put them in weird places. So, it could be kind of buggy, or it could mean that it begins to be a bit crazy. And also, I think there is a point to be put forward about them just adding it to everything. Especially SBAs and SAMs. There is a lot of SBAs right now, which my guess is they're just going to give them ammunition, right? But if they expand the mechanics to the other things like the camouflage net and also the terrain deformation stuff, there's a lot of SBAs which are hyper aggressive and are more used as tank killers nowadays. The ITSFA, for example, right, is used as a first spawn bang bang before you bring in like the tanks. So there might be some limitations that I think should be used through this, such as the SBA and SAMs maybe only getting the ammo boxes, whereas the other vehicles such as these getting access to the camouflage nets and also the digging. But those are things to obviously vote on in the setup. I think overall this plan is very positive. It will bring something new to the game, and something for a part of the game that has unfortunately been forgotten about for many years, not just by Gaijin themselves, but also many members of the community. And a new lease of life is always important, especially for stuff like this. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank GMG Smiley, CD Beans, Chieftain Mike, EMN3 Galaxy, Tulio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pyman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Ozzy Panzer, Alan Hacker, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Sem, Aslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.